Hey guys, back with another Echoing Thoughts podcast here, episode number 62. This podcast, I'm going to talk a little about rebalance. And I said I was going to talk about tiers lists, but it didn't really make sense to talk about tiers because I don't think it's changed much since my last tiers list. We've kind of been due for a rebalance. So instead, I decided to talk about some things, 5 things that I think could get rebalanced that aren't really just strictly lines and percent damage increase, but more so other things that can help improve the gameplay and help improve progress, help still improve DPS, but just in different ways, right? But before I get into that, I really want to answer this question. This was a great question by xsinner4947. Really stuck out to me because, funny enough, we were talking about this exact same thing with our team just last week, where he asked, instead of going for faster PRs, why not split the DPS to pass more guildies, right? He kind of mentioned in a later comment, you know, they have 5 hard Damien teams in their guild alone. 3 Lucid going for their 4th Lucid this week. And, it's obviously to help the guildies, to help the economy, help to, just help the server in general. And that's insane, right? The fact that they have 5 hard Damien clears, we don't even have 5 in our server. We don't even have 5 normal Damien teams, I think, in our server. And that, I think that is what kind of makes, probably is our, might be our biggest issue, to be honest, why we're not progressing. But it's also why Love has been kicking our ass in Guild Fort for so many months and years, because they're just a tier above gear wise. They're obviously doing something right over there. But for us personally, we've definitely talked about it, right? What's the point of clearing in 6 minutes, trying to hit PRs and trying to clear in 5 minutes versus 6 minutes when you can split up teams and get more people involved, right? And I think for us, we had a lot of, we thought it was a little bit premature, just because the boss just came out, right? It's still a new boss, and we're still learning, right? We still are learning strategies, techniques to not just help people internally, but like I want to help everyone else, right? Help in our server, other servers, like put out guides just to help the game in general. The best ways to clear, no matter if you have Omega whales on your team like us, or if you're barely you're clearing with 30 seconds left, right? I want to be able to help everyone in between and just get a better understanding of the the boss, right? And I thought that it was still we're still learning run to run, and the best way to do that was to test out and see kind of with our main team, basically test these things out, because we had a lot more room for error, right? We could learn a lot more that way. But yeah, we're definitely trying to. Well, we talked about it, getting more guildies involved, but we have unfortunately have quite a big of a drop off getting, I guess, from our main team to the next tier, right? We're honestly spending more time trying to get normal Damien teams up and running versus Lucid, and maybe that's where we're prioritizing, where our priorities in the wrong place. But yeah, that's kind of just where we're at right now. We have a lot of teams that are close doing hard Damien, and we only have so many resources. Our community is, you know, just unique, right? And so it creates a lot of different challenges. Scheduling is a big thing too, as well. We have people on the East Coast, West Coast, like with kids and parents that only can run after the kids are asleep. People work late. There's a lot of factors, a lot of things that go into it that I think are more than just surface level, right? Ideally, in a perfect world, we could get all these people, right, clears. We've definitely talked about it, but it's kind of our biggest challenge and our biggest obstacle that we're still trying to figure out. That you know probably why we're slightly behind a lot of servers. Not a lot of servers in Osis and Asia for sure, where their economy is a lot better and they have a lot more stones and stuff populating throughout their server. But yeah, I love that question. Yeah, I don't take offense to it at all. It was a fair question, right? It makes sense. And something that we can definitely improve on to help out people just gear up, get mezzos, things like that, and progress their characters kind of free to play. But yeah, I'll be right back, and then we'll talk about the rebalance ideas. All right. So when it comes to rebalancing, I think that in the past year or in 2023, they really focused on cap. And I'm curious, through armors, through absolabs, through necros, through guild skills, individual skills, a lot of different ways to get cap, right? Legion. And so I'm curious what they do in 2024 as far as rebalancing, if they're going to continue to increase cap to, try and get on KMSM's level, or if they're going to be content with where the max cap is at and look towards more rebalancing through line count and through percent stats, through maybe, last year was potentials, maybe they'll do armors and a lot of things. But this video, I'll talk about 5 ideas that I had that I think could come true and most likely will come true sometime this year. If not, they're great ideas. So the first one is, so this rebalance is, again, strictly DPS, right? I think this is something that they've already implemented slightly in our game. In KMSM, they've already done it, but they've started to lower CDs and cooldowns of skills and lower durations as well. I've talked about before how, they go from 3-minute cooldowns to 2-minute cooldowns or 90-minute cooldowns, and lowering the duration from 90 seconds, 2 minutes, which what a lot of big duration-based cooldowns are, down to a minute or 45 seconds. They've already done it with Demon Slayer, like I mentioned before. They've done it with a few other classes as well, and I think it's just a matter of time where they start implementing that to all classes. And I think it's for the better, right? They've clearly had a lot of success in KMSM, which I think they had theirs come out when V4 came out, but it just makes sense for our game, right? There are too many instances where I guess RNG for Endgame Bosses plays a factor where those long cooldowns, duration-based cooldowns, are not even being maximized because there's immunity phases, there's kind of even like cutscenes that interrupt duration-based skills, right? And so I think that this is something that is going to be a great improvement for all the game, and it's going to improve. It's going to allow for more flexibility in play style, differences between player and player, right? Like, I think some people are just going to still leave their skills on pets, and others are going to do it manually, right? The more, to maximize, those are people that have a better understanding of bosses can manually maximize their skills, right? So that they get the best uptime possible. And I think it's going to create a lot of unique play styles and probably learning curves and complications, right? With the amount of buttons that you're going to have on the skill wheel, it's going to make it much more challenging for mobile players versus emulated players. And with V4 coming out, even more buttons to manage and micromanage and, have at your disposal. I think it's going to be awesome. I think that's going to be a lot of fun, and it's really going to kind of separate players in a sense, but it's also going to allow for even like greater potentials, right? The higher peaks if you master your class, if you min-max it properly. So I'm excited to see that if that happens, when that happens. I think that's going to be a major DPS booster without even touching lines or percent stats at all. All right, the second rebalancing idea I think is rebalancing the defensive toolkit, right? I've talked about, changing iframes, lowering the cooldown of Synchro. It's just so long and unnecessarily overpowered. You know, lowering iframes in general, maybe from 10 seconds down to 5 seconds, and making them like from 2 minutes to 1 minute cooldowns. maybe implementing some sort of iframe with teleports, maybe even Hero's Will or Will of Urda becoming an iframe, or some sort of dispel. I think there are a lot of options here, right? But I wanted to make a point that this is about the defensive toolkit and not just iframes, right? I think there's a lot of things that they can do. If they don't touch iframes, that's totally fine. But I'm curious if they ever allow for more benefits to having evade percent, block percent, ignore defense, the hyperstat that is out there, that is just sitting there waiting to be used. These are all skills that seem like they have viability, right? Evade is an option for Necro and Absolapse. It gives a lot. There is benefit to it. There was benefit to it on the Necro level as an option, over crit rate percent, over crit attack. But it feels like it's just gone as an afterthought. And maybe that's the way they intended, but it feels like it's more beneficial for lower game bosses, even things like Mulong and Covert. It will help. But as far as endgame bosses, everything is fixed damage. Everything is, a full map attack, a one-shot, one-hit KO type of skill, where evade and block, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't have any value, right? It doesn't go into the calculations at all. And that's disappointing. And that's why I thought, it'd be interesting to incorporate, Will of Urda, Hero's Will into that somehow, right? Because there are skills that are not necessarily iframes that still have value. Think of something like Blitz Shield is great for warriors. There's Ethereal Form, which isn't technically an iframe because you will die through DR. Things like Wind Archer's Shield as well is an amazing one. Even things like the Shade or Divine Shield's Paladin, or Paladin's Divine Shield, or Shade's, I think that it's called like their Shielding Ward, their Spirit Ward, whatever it is, where it actually guards, I think, 3 attacks. These are all kind of loopholes within the defensive toolkit system that isn't necessarily evade, isn't necessarily block, but it still does something. It's effective, right? And I think that just having a better understanding of skills and maybe creating some sort of consistency where there is some sort of, excitement over having a defensive stats, right? And it's not just so HP based, right? It's whether or not you can tank things or not. Everything's fixed damage, so you need to have so much HP in order to survive or you're screwed, right? There's no way else to counter that. So I wonder, right? Would they do that? Would they change some skills, rebalance some bosses where fixed damage now becomes normal boss damage, where, or HP scaling damage, right? Where things like Benediction or Shell or party buffs can help influence how much damage your team is taking. I know in Damien, everything is pretty much fixed, while as Lucid has some mechanics in there where you can use Shell. I get it, right? You can use Shell, you can use defensive buffs to help reduce damage, but I'm just curious, right? Maybe that's something that they incorporate. I just feel like the levels of iframes is just overpowered, right? The levels of, and just the lack of defensive skills is just not there. I mean, just so obvious, right? It feels like those stats are what they're even there for, right? Like if you want to play a thief, you want to have percent evade. You want to have that ability to evade stuff, right? As a thief player. Warriors, more HP, blocking, guarding, right? Pirates, mages, archers, having some sort of balance in between where that they can, have a little bit of everything, right? It just feels like there's nothing there. There's nothing to even grasp onto. So I'm curious if that's something, I hope that's something that they look at and possibly rebalance to, improve survivability, right? Can't do any damage if you're dead. So the third thing I kind of talked about already, but it has more to do with, piggybacking off the defensive stats, but also rebalancing endgame bosses, right? It's actually been 2 years since Lotus first came out. 2022, Lotus came out. Pretty insane to think about. Yes, they incorporated solo Lotus. Yes, it's become much easier, right? But I'm curious if it's time for them to rebalance bosses, right? They've done it for last year. I think they did it for Arc and Magnus, where HP was reduced of the bosses. Mechanics were delayed or slower. Things didn't hit as hard. I'm curious in 2024 if they do Lotus and if they move it into Damien, even normal Damien, allowing for teams to clear it, allowing for teams to attempt it and clear it, right? Because it is just strange that normal Damien has the same amount of HP as hard Damien. It still creates this some sort of level of gear to actually clear, right? Maybe that's what they intended right now, and maybe that makes an easy way for them to scale back on normal Damien at least. But it's something that I'm curious that I feel like 2024 maybe a little early, right? It's still only boss has only been out for maybe a year and a half, Damien anyways. So I'm curious to see what they do with that. But yeah, Lotus for sure I think is due for a rebalance. HP damage reduction, maybe I don't know, reduction to how those stuns and stuff like that. Something, right? I think that is something that should come and will come. Whether Damien comes, that's a whole nother story. Excited to see what they bring out. And then moving on to number 4, this is a big one that I hope that they look into, right? And that is stats on armor. And what I mean by that is a lot of different things, right? Last year they did potentials. Potentials got a huge percent buff, and I think it's time for armors. But things like Necro, like a level, for example, level 60 Absolab gets like 0.1% more stats or boss attack every 2 levels. Every successful exalt from 50 to 60 is 0.1. So your level 60 Absolab piece has barely maybe a percent or two, not a lot more percent stats than a level 50, even a level 40. So it's just, I think it's time, right? I think it's time to buff those stats, right? Even if it's 5% in armor, whatever it is, that makes a difference. That adds up, right? They could even go, instead of that, they could go with changing emblems. I know that's crazy to think, but I could just see in typical Nexon fashion them throwing out reworking emblems, right? And throwing in physical damage percent or magic damage percent to emblems so that as a huge money sink, people do it, right? But like creating that, whether they increase it, the crit damage per emblem, boss attack per emblem, or not. Maybe they add in EXP emblems. I don't know. But for training, that'd be pretty cool. I think that'd be some good ideas. Whether they do it or not is a whole other story. But adding more options for emblems, maybe even accessories, emblems, adding more options to that, just like how secondary weapon has so many more emblem options. I think it's time for them to look at armors seriously and think, is 20 crit damage outdated? 10% boss attack outdated? Or is it still, or is it not helping people keep up with the cap, right? Because the cap is light years ahead of stats, in my opinion, right? And as cap goes up, people aren't starting to cap, then you're gonna need that stats. They gotta get it somewhere, right? If they're not getting from an Absolab that they're getting more cap with, if they're not getting more stats to in the same kind of trajectory, then it doesn't make sense, right? So I'm curious if that's something they do. But one route, right, again, is stats across the board. But another one, are they just going to keep on riding and just keep giving cap to everything, right? And that's what KMSM kind of did. KMSM I think there's set bonuses. Every set bonus, every armor had a ton of cap added onto it. Even I think weapons had cap, secondary weapons had cap. Let me know if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what I heard. That they just throw cap at everything, right? And I wonder if that's if they want to go in that direction instead of kind of allowing for percent stats to catch up. They just keep going more cap, 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 cap. Cap is king, and they just throw it on to everything. That'd be an interesting route too. I'm curious what they do, but either way, I think that percent stats or armors in some way could use a rework, mainly in the percent stats. Cap is fine in my opinion, but the percent stats is really something that I feel like is due for a rework or rebalance. And then the last one is B skills. Right, B skills are something that KMSM actually implements into the rebalances quite a bit, and we haven't seen it yet since they added ignore enemy defense to V skills. But that is another way that they can not affect too much, not create such great imbalance in the game, but just adding 3% ignore enemy defense, 3% to 6%, or 6% to 9% ignore enemy defense to a V skill, or reducing it if it feels like it's too overpowered, are easy ways to not drastically change the meta, but by just small changes here and there. Something's gonna, instead of doing 15% of their damage, it's gonna do 12% of their damage, things like that. Not a big deal. Or maybe they could even, if they wanted to go another route, if they don't touch ignore enemy defense, they could again lower cooldowns, things like that, like I mentioned, but also shorten, speed up, I guess, hold down skills, or kind of those duration based skills, more lines and less time would be nice. Like things like Paladin's V3, instead of being a 6 second hold down, it could be 5 seconds, same lines or whatever. Or I don't know, even like Shuriken for Night Lords, right? One of the biggest issues that they have is if that thing, the boss moves, they're screwed, right? So if they can place it down and get the same amount of lines in less time, it just allows for more consistency, right? A little bit more room for error. But that is something that I'm interested in. Even something like decent nodes, if they end up giving more percent stats at levels, like say decent sharp eyes could give 1% more crit damage every 5 levels. That'd be pretty nice, right? Incentivize people to continue to level these decent nodes. Or if they just went the route of how levels, every level of a decent node, you get 0.4% physical attack. Maybe they bump that up to 0.8. Maybe they bump that up to 0.6, whatever it is, just to allow another way to allow for stats where it's not free per se. You still have to progress it, but it's just another, again, nodes are a big part of the game. Usually number one priority is getting your nodes maxed. So if you're getting people to, if they want to change the markets, change the economy, right? Raise the prices of nodes again, help node farmers make mesos. That's a great one too as well. A lot of options, right? I'm sure there are a lot more, but these are just some things that I thought of, been thinking about, wanted to share. Rebalances. There's a lot of different ways to go at it. Obviously, the tried and true skill percent, lines, everyone's going to be happy. Everyone, just making everyone happy. But these are different ways. You could call them quality of life changes. You could just call them straight rebalances to certain, to armors or whatever it is. I hope some of these get implemented. I'm sure some of them will, but I'm curious what else there is that maybe you have more knowledge of KMSM or PC, Maple that they've done in the past that could be implemented in our game. I'd love to hear it, right? I always get excited about these things, but curious if there's other things. People always have great ideas as well. So let me know in the comments if you have any other thoughts about rebalances, things they can do to improve the game, things that you want to see improved this year. Let me know. But Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.